Whenever I break this deck out, as soon as other players see the name Kaalia, even when I tell them specifically, it's not Kaalia of the Vast, it's the other Kaalia, they freak out. Hey, I'm a creative who, among many things, has been playing Magic the Gathering for a decade. I love to brew decks more than I even love to play with them. Winding back the clock to 2019, I opened an M19 booster and there was a Kaalia Zenith Seeker. At the time, I wasn't familiar with the previous incarnation of Kaalia, I wasn't even playing Commander at the time, but I always wanted to build a deck around this Commander. When I started that process, of course, I quickly learned about who Pyre of the Vast was. I never wanted to build a deck with Pyre of the Vast as the Commander, knowing how much of a threat it would be, and it's very important in Commander that you're not perceived to be the threat if you're going to have any chance of actually winning a game, or for that matter, having fun. Kaalia Zenith Seeker is a 3/3 human cleric with flying and vigilance. When she enters the battlefield, you look at the top 6 cards of your library, and from among those cards you may choose up to 1 angel, up to 1 demon, and up to 1 dragon to add to your hand. With the way that I built the deck, with so many angels, demons, and dragons, there is only a 3% chance that you will whiff on this effect and get nothing, and there is a 2/3 chance that you will get at least 2 cards out of this. This deck centers around 2 specific artifacts. One is Panharmonicon for doubling all your enter the battlefield effects, and the other is my personal favorite and the main engine for this deck, Pyre of Heroes. Pyre of Heroes is a 2-mana artifact with an activated ability that reads 2 and tap and sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card that shares a creature type with the sacrificed creature and has mana value equal to 1 plus that creature's mana value. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library, and you can only do this as a sorcery. In effect, this lets you level up your creatures. This means you can sacrifice a low-level dragon to get a higher-level dragon, likewise for angels and demons. There are also a few shapeshifters in this deck that allow you to start to shift between different types of creatures with Pyre. But there are also a couple of creatures that share some creature types in common with Kaalia Zenith Seeker herself. Most notably, Kaalia of the Vast is in the 99 of this deck. She's 1 mana value higher than Kaalia Zenith Seeker, so you can sacrifice your commander to the Pyre to go and get that slightly more threatening Kaalia if you feel the need to. And you're not really too upset about getting Kaalia back in the command zone because when you recast her, she's just going to net you more card advantage. However, one creature that I think is even better to get out of the 99 than Kaalia of the Vast, depending on the board state, is Mardu Siegebreaker. This card is insane in this deck. Mardu Siegebreaker is a 4-mana human warrior. It's a 4/4 with Death Touch and Haste. When it enters, you exile up to 1 other target creature you control until this card leaves the battlefield. Whenever this creature attacks, remembering it has haste, so it's going to attack the turn it comes in, for each opponent, which is probably going to be 3 in Commander, create a tapped token that's a copy of the card you exiled with this effect. Each of those tokens is attacking one of your opponents. At the beginning of the end step, you have to sacrifice those tokens. But what this means is that if you've got an enter the battlefield effect creature on the board, whose effect you really want to keep copying every turn, you get to do that 3 times per turn with Mardu Siegebreaker. It's ridiculous. This deck really gets going if you've got Panharmonicon on the field. Doubling up all of your Enter the Battlefield effect triggers are going to take this deck from being underpowered to actually being quite competitive. Because this deck is built around 2 specific artifact cards, we need some tutors to get those cards out. So this deck is running both Vampiric Tutor and Enlightened Tutor to help get those artifacts to your hand. And of course, because these tutors are considered game changers, this deck is in bracket 3. Right, so what are the creatures that we're actually running? Well, we have to have a spread of creatures between mana value 2, going all the way up to 8, to make sure that we've always got something accessible for us to sacrifice to Pyre. And also in order to make sure that we're hitting at least 2 cards quite frequently with Kaalia's effect for it to be worth playing in the command zone, we need to have a lot of angels, demons, and dragons in this deck. I won't go through every single creature in this deck, but you can roughly break down the enters effects that the creatures have into 3 different categories. One is interaction, helping you destroy or disable or remove creatures, artifacts, enchantments, and even lands and people's graveyards. We want to make sure that we've got answers to everything in this deck. There's also cards that are going to ramp you. Normally that's through creating treasure tokens upon entering the battlefield. And then we've got card selection effects. This usually means rummaging, but there are also several cards that are going to mill cards directly into your graveyard, which, if you get a reanimation piece later on, is effectively card selection for you. Terror of the Peaks is one of the powerhouses in this deck. You really want to get this card out. Now, every time you play a creature, you're going to start burning creatures or burning face as a way to help close out the game. Very effective card. Doubles up with Panharmonicon on the field as well, of course. Obsidian Charmor is a good way of getting rid of a non-basic land your opponent has if it's causing any issues. Angel of Despair is going to destroy a target permanent when it enters of any kind. Gormand is going to force your opponents to sacrifice a creature. While this does have an additional cost of sacrificing a creature if you hard cast this, chances are you're not going to be hard casting this creature in order to get it out. Sunblast Angel is a soft board wipe. Destroy all tapped creatures. Quite a handy thing to have. Demon of Dark Schemes is also going to function like a soft board wipe, putting -2/-2 onto all of the creatures on the battlefield. Of course, if you can double that effect, that's going to start to clear most of the creatures away. Angel of Serenity is another effective way of getting rid of many pieces on the board that you just need to get out of the way. Immerstrom Raider is a good low-cost demon to get out onto the board early, fuel your graveyard, and draw you some new cards. Runescarred Demon will tutor upon entering the battlefield. Hoarding Broodlord is also going to allow you to effectively tutor up any card you want. We always want to look for ways to kind of cheat spells onto cards that Kaalia can search up. In addition to having Kindred Instants with Changeling, we're also running some of the Omen Dragons. These aren't necessarily the strongest cards, but being able to add a card to hand like Stormshriek Feral, who you can just use as a discard to draw 2 card, is quite handy in the deck when you're looking for that kind of effect anyway. And moreover, the fact that these cards shuffle back into the library now means they're available for you to tutor up with Pyre of Heroes, or if you use Kaalia's effect again, this card's just going to be there again for you to draw. Bearing in mind there's not a great deal of card advantage in this deck. Remember that Kaalia Zenith Seeker is your main card advantage engine. Normally in a Kaalia of the Vast deck, what you have is a creature that allows you to cheat your creatures, your big angels and demons and dragons into play. But because we're not playing her as the commander, we don't always have access to that. But we're still going to end up drawing a lot of high mana value creatures, so we need to find ways to cheat them into play. In addition to having Kaalia of the Vast in the 99, we're also running Sneak Attack as a way to sneak those creatures directly from your hand into play. Aether Vial, which is by far the best turn 1 play this deck can have. There's also several cards in this deck that will help fuel the graveyard, and you'll be able to reanimate some of those creatures back. So we're running Persist, but you can run any other instants and sorceries that will reanimate creatures. Several of the creatures in this deck also have Enters effects that are going to allow you to reanimate some of your creatures. Right, if we've got creatures on the board with Enter the Battlefield effects, obviously we want to be playing a Blink package. Not only is this going to get all of our Enter the Battlefield effects to trigger once again, this can also function as good protection for your board. For this particular deck at the moment, I'm running Ephemerate, Lae'zel's Acrobatics, Ghostway, and Semester's End, but there are numerous other cards that do a similar thing that you can run in this deck. Some of the creatures are also going to help you with Blink effects too, and remembering that if the creatures have an Enter effect that says Blink something and you've got Panharmonicon on the board, you're going to get to blink 2 things, and then each of those things is going to trigger twice when it comes back. So you start to really get exponential with the power of this deck when you've got that card on board. I'm also running Nahiri's Resolve. Generally having effects like this that give all of your creatures haste are also quite handy in this deck. You're not always going to be cheating them into play with Sneak Attack or cheating them into play with Kaalia, so you can't guarantee that they're going to be able to attack the turn that they come in. Having a couple of haste enablers just really helps make sure that you get the most out of your deck in terms of pushing ahead. In terms of lands, the Surveil lands are very handy in this deck. They're going to help get cards into your graveyard that you can then later reanimate. Because this deck doesn't have a huge amount of card advantage, I'm also running the Bounce lands. It just helps to make sure that you've always got a land in hand to play. If you miss a land drop in this deck, it can really hurt and you can fall behind. And then as far as utility lands, look, you need to make sure that you're able to produce colored mana in this deck. That's just the simple reality. Especially when you're running something like Sneak Attack, it's very important that you always have red mana available as well. I'll put a link to this deck list on Archidekt below. Just note that the way that it's set up right now is how the deck is currently built, but I don't think that this deck is fully optimized or necessarily the best version of this deck that it can be. I'm the kind of brewer who likes to use the cards that I already have, and if I find singles that I think are going to work well in the deck that are relatively cheap, I'll probably pick them up when it's convenient, but I'm not going to go out of my way to really optimize this deck in a way that's going to cost a lot of money. Truth be told, as things currently stand, this does not look like a budget deck whatsoever. There's a small number of cards in there that I just happen to have copies of that are making it quite expensive. Certainly though, there's a much more budget-friendly version of this deck that could exist. Whenever I build a deck, I'm always trying to find a way to build it in a way that just isn't the same as what other people are doing. And when I'm building that deck, I'm always asking myself the question, is this going to be fun to play with? And is this going to be fun to play against? And also, is this going to make me look like the threat at the table? Honestly, the fun of this deck is that it's kind of a bit underpowered. This deck can be explosive in the mid to late game. It is relatively non-threatening at the start of the game. That being said, there are some people who still will not see past the first name of the card when you play this. I encourage you, if you play a deck like this, to have a conversation with the people at your table and make it clear. This is not the Kaalia that is a threat. This Kaalia deck is built to be fun to play with and play against. Thanks for listening, and if you like this kind of deck profile, let me know in the comments, and this is the sort of thing that I'm happy to do again.